Good morning. I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Holacek, Ukrainian philosopher, historian, early American philosopher, historian, author of over 70 published books, mostly on philosophical topics. And I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Eye on Ukraine, 10th episode. And I want to talk about what happened in the Oval Office yesterday between Donald Trump, his stooge, J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And the title of this talk will be Ambush in the White House, because I think that's essentially what happened. I think not all agree with this, but I think this was completely premeditated. I will argue for that. I'll give you my arguments. But it's, to me, at least fairly compelling that this was all premeditated. This was a video on display for the global audience where Trump is going to score a signal victory over Volodymyr Zelensky and have him grovel in front of an international audience to say thank you, thank you, thank you for all you've done. It's really Donald Trump, right, that gave you the appropriate weaponry. That's really been the decisive factor in any sort of success that the Ukrainian people have had, not Joseph Biden. And of course, Trump can't get by without a few digs in Joseph Biden. So today, let's look at piecemeal this transcript, and I'm going to offer a commentary as we go along. I think it'll be illuminating. I hope you enjoy it. Before we do that, please like and share this video. It'll be a little bit on the lengthy side, but I think it'll be worth the effort here. So let me screen share here and dig up this transcript. Now, everything starts in some measure when they dig at Zelensky. Trump makes some quiet comment audible about Zelensky appearing in his play clothes, or whatever the heck he says. But the idea is Zelensky's in military fatigues, and Trump he's got to start everything with by showing his power, his advantage, already playing a card and trying to show. We're going to get into this whole notion of card playing, how that metaphor. I don't even know if Trump knows it's a metaphor. He might think it's actually what's going on here, that there really is a game of cards. But he fails to recognize this is oftentimes standard practice by leaders during conflicts. Churchill, during World War II, shows up to the White House, as we see in the picture, in military fatigues. It's a matter of showing support for your troops. So that's all Zelensky's been doing ever since the war started. He's not wearing a suit and tie. He's showing up in military fatigues to show he's one primus inter pares, the leader of his troops, and one with his troops. Now let's go through this. And at some point, Vance says, and I'll read this, the parts in red I think are a little more important. For 4 years, the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaged in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden, of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President's United States actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing. So his little puppy dog here is going to give. Zelensky interrupts, and notice how Zelensky, as we go on, is not going to be able to get a word in edgewise. He'll very seldom have any sort of even remotely protracted comments. He's unable to be able to link sentence with sentence to be able to defend himself or say what he wants to say. And that's, again, all premeditated. It's this bulldozing technique that Trump likes to use, where he goes on and constantly interrupts Zelensky without really saying anything, just repeating the same nonsensical things. Zelensky says, "Can I ask you?" And they're talking. There's some verbiage here. They're talking about, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and Trump goes, "This is 15." Zelensky says 2014, and Trump, "Oh, 2014, I was not here." He doesn't even know what's not to know that Russia first invaded Crimea and Donbass in 2014. When you're in discussions about the war, the Russian-Ukrainian war is pretty pathetically bad. But Trump knows nothing about U.S. history. When he was out, I was reading some account when he was at Pearl Harbor. He was on a ship or something like that, and it was brought. Pearl Harbor was brought up, and he really knew very little about it. He was sort of astonished about everything. A lot of water, that Pacific Ocean, a lot of water, and it's wet. It's that wet water, really wet water. Right, and Vance goes, that's exactly right. Zelensky, so here's one instance where Zelensky gets in a few sentences. 2014, 2022, the situation is the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him, Putin. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversations, my bilateral conversation. And we signed with him, me, like you, President in 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel at the time. She was the chancellor. We signed a ceasefire. Ceasefire, all of them told me these are the Minsk agreements, right? And didn't abide by them. All of them told me he would never go, but after that, he broke the ceasefire. He killed our people. He didn't exchange prisoners. He pledged to exchange prisoners. He didn't do it. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, are you asking me about? What did it mean? So this rattles Vance. He doesn't know anything about what's been going on either. He just doesn't like that, okay? We need to have diplomacy. What Zelensky's trying to do right off the bat, this shows that you can't go into diplomatic discussions with Putin. He'll betray his word each and every time. He's got a track record. I think Zelensky mentioned some 25 times that he's gone back on his word or violated agreements since he took the office of the presidency. Don't get me on that. The number, I may be off a little bit. But so he's just trying to say he's not reliable. And anybody who knows, I've done a lot of research on Putin. I'm working on a book, Putin's Obsession with Ukraine, and the first 3 chapters are on Putin. And he's a very nasty, disgusting, reliable human being. Not much different from Donald Trump, by the way. So, and Vance goes, I'm talking about kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of a country. Yes, but then he goes on and says, it's disrespectful of you. You come into the Oval Office, right, and you're jumping all over. He goes, right now you guys are going around forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for being willing to bring an end to the conflict. Again, this notion of demanding that Zelensky thank the president, right? Thanking the president, not thanking the American people or thanking Joe Biden or anybody, but just thanking Donald Trump. It's all about Trump here, right? Egocentric son of a bitch. And the whole notion is that Zelensky's never thanked the American people and the American presidents or even Donald Trump. He's done so an abundance of times. That doesn't get recognized because here we have a political power play. We have an ambush going on. And, they're talking about bringing an end to conflict. And the thing is, they always want this immediate end to the conflict. Why immediate? It can't happen immediately. Putin does not want an end to the conflict. He's got a war economy going on. All the production in the country, the lion's share of it is all towards producing military equipment, guns and bullets and rifles and tanks and all sorts of military equipment, and to the neglect of the Russian people. But then, Putin doesn't care about the Russian people. The ceasefire plays right into Putin's hands. He's in a very desperate situation on the battlefield. You can talk about the encroachments they made on Ukrainian territory. They're not sustainable. And in fact, with a little military aid, I think you'll be seeing them being pushed back quite readily if they can get that aid. The difficulty, of course, is that the United States is the largest military machine in the world. We spend so much money on, I'm not going to say we anymore, they spend so much money on military. And even if Europe wants to help by upping its money, they don't have the military equipment, need to buy a lot of it from the United States. If Trump could say, I'm not selling you anything, I don't care. So we are all dependent on Almighty King Trump for answers. So everybody has to grovel up to him, unfortunately. Uh, all right. So Zelensky says, have you ever been to Ukraine? Have you ever seen the problems we have? And Vance starts to say, I've been to, and Zelensky says, come on. And Vance, really stupidly, I've watched and seen the stories, what Fox News, I said, and I know what happens is you bring people, you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. You agree that you've had problems bringing people in your military. So here again, non sequitur. And let's change the subject, right? No, I have. Instead of saying, no, I haven't been there. So I really don't quite understand what's been going on. Let's change the subject and talk about you forcing people into the military. Iceman's for Zelensky is urging people to join the military, right? If you're over 18 and from 25, I don't remember what the other upper age limit is, you're not allowed to leave the country. But this is, a dire situation. These are dire circumstances, right? In Ukraine, the country, the stake, its existence is at stake. All right. So Vance, says we've seen stories and all that. And Zelensky says we have problems. Of course, we have a problem. Comes back. Do you think that is respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of the country? Now, in my estimation, I don't think Trump gives a rat's ass about Ukraine. I don't think he gives a shit about the existence of Ukraine. I mean, Vance said that to the effect prior to taking office, he could care whether Ukraine exists or not. I don't think Trump cares either. I'll explain. I think Trump is only interested in Ukraine right now for one reason, because he found out through Zelensky about their rare minerals. They're 20-something trillion dollars worth of rare minerals. So Zelensky urges a rewind, as it were. Let's start from the beginning, okay? Zelensky says, during the war, everybody has problems, even you. You have a nice ocean. You don't feel it now, you'll feel it in the future. Now, this is a pretty sharp dig by Zelensky into Trump's plentiful stomach, right? The big fat ass sitting next to him is, Trump said on numerous cases, Europe needs to get involved. We have an ocean. It doesn't concern us. They can't harm us. Right? Well, that's not true. And Trump is right, of course, I think, to urge Europe to do more to defend themselves. And they haven't been doing their share. And with that, I'm in agreement. But the way he goes about, right, he doesn't urge people. He doesn't sit down and say, look, behind closed doors, he does it on camera to humiliate people, to get the upper hand. He's got this fucking narcissistic need to show he's a superior human being. And in doing so, he always shows himself to be the worst sort of person, an inferior scumbag. All right. Trump says, you don't know that. You don't know that. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. Trump is irate at this point. And Zelensky doesn't quite flabbergasted. I'm trying to answer some questions. Trump goes, you're in no position to dictate that. And he repeats it. And Vance says, that's exactly what you're doing. You're dictating. And Trump iterates, you're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. Notice I underscore the word dictate. Notice it's cognate dictatorship. Dictator. Trump's using that. You're not a dictator. I'm the dictator. Don't tell me. I'm the person to tell you. We're going to feel really good about this. And Zelensky comes back and contradicts him again. No, you'll feel influenced. In other words, what he means, his English is not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. He means you're going to feel the effects of it, like it or not. And Trump, no, we're not. We're going to feel good and strong. Trump's vocabulary, if you haven't noticed, is very limited. Very good, very strong. Yes, good, bad, tall, strong, weak, things like that. Monosyllabic words are just, he's at pains to usher them up. Talking about Ukraine being in a bad position from the very beginning of the war. You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Now, Zelensky objects, and rightfully so. I'm not playing cards. I'm very serious, Mr. President. I'm very serious. And while he's saying this, Trump is interrupting him, not letting him speak. Yeah, as I transcribe this, you don't get that. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of a million people. You're gambling with World War III. This is exactly what Trump is doing in his little fucking MAGA power play to his minions, to the shoehorn uh, type IQs in his MAGA people. He's pandering to them to show what a powerful godlike figure he is. You're playing cards. You're going to start World War III. This is essentially what Trump is doing. He's the one who's playing cards. Zelensky is here pandering to the president, trying to feed his ego as the British Prime Minister and the French President were doing a couple days ago. I imagine how difficult that must have been to kiss Trump's ass as much as you had to just to get him in a favorable position. Maybe he didn't have enough Big Macs at the time and he wasn't feeling good. Maybe Macron said, after this, I'll take you out to McDonald's, my treat. All right. And then comes back. So the point is it's Trump doing the gambling. Look, when a dignitary, here the president of a free nation, comes to the United States, another country of a free nation, he should be treated with a special dignity and respect. In Greece, they call it philoxenia, love of others, love of foreigners. You treat them. They're on foreign territory. They're on foreign turf. You make them feel comfortable. Negotiations are often tough. When you got to do it from Ukraine to in the United States, it makes it decuples the difficulties of the visit. So, anyways, Vance chimes in again, and he's got to get, since he was in Munich, and lectured all the nations, especially Germany, of Europe about what a democracy is. And this puppy of 40 years old, this ass-kissing toady, comes back in. Have you said thank you once? It's a power play. They want Zelensky to say thank you, thank you, thank you 1,000 times in this interview. Get on your knees and do what you have to do and beg. Then he goes in and hits the dagger. You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition. You weren't even campaigning for Trump for president. Duh. Can you see why? Because he's a fucking flaming moron. He's an idiot. He's a power-loving, power-grasping narcissist. Okay, and Vance comes back. You need to offer words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president. Just skip the United States. You need to say it to Trump. Trying to save your country. No, he's not. And Zelensky's had enough. He goes, please, you think if you speak very loudly about the war, you can. He's interrupted again. It doesn't so much mean loudly. He just means, look, I'm trying to answer questions and get in my 2 cents. You never allow me a moment to express my thoughts. So here I am. I'm going to bully. We're in the Oval Office, so Trump can dominate. I'm going to bully you. I'm not going to let you answer the questions. We're just going to keep pummeling you with, why don't you say thank you? You're being disrespectful. Say thank you. You're being disrespectful again and again and again. And Trump chimes in. He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble. Right? And Zelensky goes, can I answer? No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country's in big trouble. Big words from Donald Trump again. He actually got into a disyllabic word, trouble. So he's defending his minion. Zelensky can answer, Then he goes, you're not winning. You're not winning this. This is Trump. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us. It's only because of what the United States has done that Ukraine's in any position to do anything whatsoever. Zelensky said, Mr. President, we're staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone. We're thankful. I said, thanks. Right? And Trump goes back, but you need our military equipment. You'd be wiped out really quickly, in 3 days, in a couple of weeks. And Putin says, Zelensky says, no, probably in 3 days or so. That's what Putin said. Surprised, I think it might be a dig here because you're saying in a few weeks or something like that. Putin said 3 days. How come you haven't followed his script very carefully? Vance comes in again, just say thank you. And then Zelensky goes, I said a lot of times thank you to American people. Here he's omitting Trump or omitting Vance. He says he owes his gratitude to the American. I don't blame him at this point. This power hungry motherfucker is just intent on humiliating, forcing Zelensky to grovel, right? A lot of people commented on this. I watched numerous videos already talking about Zelensky could have been more diplomatic. He should have been better prepared. Yeah, he will next time. But the point is, I don't think he was ready for this. I think this was, this was a photo opportunity where the two presidents are going to meet, exchange some pleasantries, and then go on, after a few minutes, answer a few questions, the light questions with light answers, and then go on to, you want to come down, Jeff? And then go on to discuss and negotiate, see if they can't come up with a proposal, with an agreement on minerals or something like that, or ceasefire. I suspect that was not going to happen anyway. Okay. So, Vance, chimes in. He says, except there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media. When you're wrong, we know that you're wrong. Wrong about what? Trump always was bitching about the $350 billion United States spent. Again, he said before it was 300 billion at one point. He goes, no, that might be high. I don't know. Maybe it's less. Who knows? Now it's 350 billion. He said that on a number of occasions. It's not. It's at most 180 billion, if that. Some estimates that it's about 120 billion. So the whole notion is, again, Trump uses hyperbole, force, steamrolling, and all sorts of things like that to get his way with Zelensky. Does that to everybody. This guy is not fit to be an American president. He's not even fit to be a businessman. Probably should be a lawyer instead, right? The bullying techniques, the lack of regard for, not picking on all lawyers, of course, but the unscrupulous ones, but the lack of concern for facts and evidence to back up claims, just using rhetorical tactics in an aggressive manner to get his way, especially since he's on his home turf. Again, he talks about, look at what Trump does. Again, he just steamrolls with just throwing out a bunch of stupid claims. You don't have the cards. Well, as Zelensky said, it's not a fucking card game. We're talking about people dying. We're talking about some 19,000 children having been abducted by Russians and pulled away to Russia to be indoctrinated in their bullshit, their revisionist history about how great Russia is, how Ukraine started the war, how the West is evil, how NATO is evil. Now they have to rewrite the history books and talk about the great Donald Trump, right? But he's up there with Stalin, Putin, and Trump. He's going to be up there. What a triad that makes. Then he goes, you don't have the cards. Number one, you're buried there. People are dying. You're running low on soldiers, right? So he's got four things. Now, they're not running low on soldiers. They have quite a few soldiers. Perhaps not as much as the Russian army at the point, but they need equipment. People are dying. They're dying on both sides. They're dying on the Russian side at a much greater rate. And Russia is in a really, really dire situation. They're the ones that really badly need a ceasefire. I'll say something about that. You're buried there. I don't know what that means. People are buried there. I don't know if he's buried in terms of dead people, but who knows? I mean, Trump doesn't even know. He said, then he goes, then you tell us, and he's being, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I want this. I don't know what the fuck that means. Look, if you can get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying, up getting killed. Well, if there's no ceasefire and Ukrainians are adequately equipped, it's the Russian soldiers that are falling. It's the Russian soldiers that are half drunk half the time. They're there presumably for the money, and a lot of them don't even care about the money anymore. There are people on crutches going to the front, forcibly going to the front. There are people whose contracts have expired that are forced to go back into the war. This is not a war that Russian soldiers, not all at least, want to fight. He's insistent that we need an immediate ceasefire. And I want to say more about that later. The immediacy. He always wants to have a ceasefire. That's what Putin needs right now. He will not stop the war, but he does need a ceasefire to regroup, to catch his breath. What happened in that hour and a half conversation between Trump and Putin? Trump, it occurs to me, sold his soul to the devil because he keeps going back to that. In many instances, he's talking about, well, we have to talk about poor Ukrainian, poor Zelensky. What about Putin? They were forced into the war, right? No, they weren't. Study the history of NATO, you fucking moron, right? NATO started with 12 countries. Now it comprises 32 countries. It's a defensive alliance, and it's essentially started, Truman and so forth, after World War II because of fear of Russian aggression, how Russia cordoned off, Germany and so forth, and the Cold War began. And so we had all sorts of difficulties with Stalin at the time, and the West realized we're in real trouble here. So they started NATO, which was a defensive alliance. And after Putin was elected, prior to Putin being elected, after Ukraine, the USSR fell apart, there were 12 former Soviet, quote unquote, republics that aimed and wanted to join and did join NATO. Why? Just to be a threat against Russia? No, because they were swallowed up. They worried about being swallowed up by Russia. That was the intent. It's clear to people in Eastern Europe who've been there, who know Putin, who've been there before, that the intention of this war criminal, this vile, despicable person, is to gain more and more territory. I say in a couple of my books, Russia throughout its history has been the most land-hungry country in the existence of the world. They currently own 1/6 of the land on the planet. They want more, and astonishingly, they want more land. No one even seems to notice this, but they never take care of the people living on that land. They don't care. It's all about catering to the people in power, the very few people in power. All right, so they want to ceasefire, and I believe seriously that Trump wants a ceasefire because he knows it would be to Putin's benefit, so he can restock and resupply, right? And Trump is happy with Putin coming in and destroying all of Ukraine. He just doesn't give a shit, right? He's happy with China taking Taiwan. I want Canada as the 51st state. Awful bad, a big ass one state. So is he, I think, I've talked to many people about this. Is he really an imperialist whose intention is, well, I'm going to grow the United States in my own image and likeness, and I'll be in North America. Maybe we'll even take Mexico and South America, and I'll be the big autocrat, the big dictator, right, on the West and the North in South America. And I'll have Greenland, and Russia will have Ukraine, and if it wants to take over the countries of Europe, fine. China can have Taiwan, but China's going to get the short end of the stick there. It's not getting as much land. So that's a very dangerous situation. I don't have to tell anybody, because what happens if you get these three empires, right? Then they're going to fight among themselves, because one is ultimately going to want to be the supreme emperor, the roi du monde, le roi du monde, right? The president of the world, the king of the world. All right. Zelensky said, ask our people about a ceasefire. What do they think? The idea is they don't want a ceasefire. They want security guarantees. I understand that, because a number of times, right, the Minsk were disobeyed, and Putin never had any intention of obeying them. I'll sign a piece of paper, and then when the time's right, I'm going to go and attack. I'll keep up the fight, keep up the war. Right? He sent his little green men into Crimea to do his dirty work. They tore off the Russian patches, and it was just, who were these people? There were certain activists who were probably Ukrainian activists fed up with Ukrainians' tyranny. No, they weren't. These are Russian soldiers, these little green men. So this is all hypocrisy by Vladimir Putin, right? And then Trump goes in, he's got to blame all the other presidents before him. It was Obama. I gave you javelins. I gave you javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. Obama. Trump gave you javelins. The great Donald Trump, who's going to take the Gaza Strip and make it a resort area, the likes of which will rival the Disney World or the Riviera or something like that. All the people, we'll just get rid of all the Palestinians, all the other people we don't want there, rebuild it and make it a vacation paradise. And this big statue of Donald Trump sitting with, and then he'll be lying on a, stretched out with a beverage of his choosing with Netanyahu or somebody, just having a grand old time in Trumpville, right? Potter from Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. Boy, don't they like. Okay, so we get this, and Trump gets his final words in. They don't. Zelensky's just irate at this time. He's just thinking, what the fuck happened? Now, a Polish reporter asks a question about, what if Russia asks again? And Trump has just lost it at this point. Listen, follow this. What, if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay, what if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Right? Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt. All I can say is this: he might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, broken them with Biden. He did, maybe he did. I didn't know what happened, but I didn't break them. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. This whole notion, Trump is a god. The other presidents just weren't strong enough like Trump. Putin would never violate a deal with Trump. Oh, give me a fucking break, right? And if he didn't at the time, he would violate it prior to your presidency or after your presidency. He wants the Russian lands of the former Soviet Union back, and then perhaps even all of Europe. The guy is completely bonkers, right? And then he ends with, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. You're looking at Zelensky at the time. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States, basically without me. I made you. I am a tough guy, right? I am the dictator. You can't be a dictator unless I empower you to be a dictator. Then you're going to be a sub-dictator, right? I am the tough guy. If you think you're a tough guy, you're a tough guy. Trump is probably objecting to Zelensky in the military fatigues. He's starting to think, oh boy, you don't look militaristic at all. You don't look frightening. You're a little man, right? Trump is probably jealous because he's not in military fatigues at some point, right? Notice this draft dodger commenting on the dress of Zelensky, right? And your people are brave, but you're either going to make a deal or we're out. If you're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty. Well, I don't even need to go on. It's not a nice thing. These monosyllabic words. Once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. A lot of monosyllabic words. His vocabulary is extraordinary if you haven't seen. And then he says, all right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? This is going to be great television. I'll say that. This is whatever the program was where he's firing everybody prior to the presidency. I could never watch it because his megalomania was on fullest display, just relishing in firing people. Just seeing himself on TV every day was a sheer joy. Watching himself, Narcissus, looking at his image in the water and just relishing and falling in love with himself, right? And Trump just cannot abide Zelensky saying anything, right, in disagreement with him. You don't disagree with the great King Trump, right? So it's going to be great television. This is another reason. I think this is two reasons why it's premeditated. One, J.D. Vance interrupts at certain times with certain fairly measured words that don't really carry much weight, but he thinks they do. At these sort of photo ops, the cabinet members, if they're invited, they keep their mouths shut. the shut. And that's what didn't happen here. So this was sort of planned by Trump. If he gets out of line, let's goad him. And when he gets out of line, and let's make this great TV because all my MAGA morons, these people with an IQ of a shoehorn, right, can see what a great, powerful leader I am, the great Oz, the great King Trump, right? So that was the whole thing. I think this was premeditated. Then when he says it'll be great television, I think we've seen enough. And earlier on, he chides Vance. He says, "No, let this go on. This needs to go on, right? Because people need to see what's going on here." So this is as far as I'm concerned, premeditated. It's immoral. I'm disgusted with the whole thing, and I have a few more comments and call it here. Let's focus on just what we get out of this. What are we to conclude? Again, I think this was premeditated, and I gave my two reasons. I think they're both compelling reasons, right? He talks about this being great television and so forth. Talking about war as a business transaction or as a card game. This is disgusting. It's unprecedented in the history of interaction between democratic nations in time of war. World War II, for example, Churchill getting aid. I showed you the picture of Churchill going to the United States, right, in military duds. Imagine Roosevelt saying to Churchill, "Yeah, we'll help you out, but you got to give us half of all your reserves, half of all your minerals, half of everything you make. Any kind of money that the government makes surplus needs to go to the United States." This has never been done, and the very fact that Trump is taking a matter with some moral urgency, a matter where Ukrainians are being killed, where they didn't start the war. I think the Estonian president said, if Russians stop aggressing, the war is over. If Ukrainians stop aggressing, Ukraine is over. Ukraine is done. And that's true. But there's a difference between the mindsets of the two. Ukraine is simply fighting for its existence, fighting for its life. Why the immediacy of ceasefire? I think this is something that Putin communicated to Trump without telling Trump that, look, my economy is in shambles. We can't go on much longer. Our reserves, monetary reserves for fighting the war, are desperately low. Inflation is skyrocketing. We've got cripples fighting. We had to buy North Korean troops to do some of our fighting. That was a complete disaster. Everything is falling apart in Russia. So we need some time to regroup. And I think that was communicated to Trump in a way that Trump is not very good at putting all the pieces together, adding 2 + 2. 2 + 2 for him could wind up being anything. Who knows? It's too difficult on the brain. This is not a very brainy person, someone who doesn't like to read, someone whose reading comprehension is bad, someone who's only good at pushing for deals through bullying tactics. So this was a concerted effort. The astonishing thing is both the ignorance of the people. I'm talking about Hedgehog, Secretary of Defense, J.D. Vance, Vice President, and Donald Trump, their ignorance of the provenance of war. How did the war start? Why did it start? What is the history of the tension between Russia and Ukraine? Ukrainians have been oppressed by Russians for centuries, and without knowing that. And Ukrainians have a strong desire to westernize, to democratize. And they've not been very good at that. There's been corruption in Ukraine for decades since and Zelensky admits it continues, but the effort is to eradicate it root and branch. And they're making a more of a concerted effort to eradicate the corruption in their government than we do in the United States. And in our Senate, our House of Representatives are corrupt. This bipartisanship, the failure of congresspersons to speak out against the brutality of Trump is astonishing to me. I mean, I would have thought with all the stupid mistakes that he's made since taking the presidency, this is going to easily be the worst president in the history of the United States. and he's going to go down in history, not because of his greatness of all the great things that he did, because of his his weighty stupidity. Um, and that's that. I don't know what else to say about that. So it's really all about, you want to come up, Jeff? It's all about, come here, you got to wait. It's all about the minerals, minerals, minerals. The only reason that Trump has any interest in Ukraine at this juncture, when Zelensky communicated to him that they have these rare minerals well into the $22 trillion worth of so, that's an estimate, but that's a reasonable estimate. Trump's eyes bulged out and he found he had to get away to try to get those minerals. And the proposals that he handed Zelensky were scandalous. We're taking advantage of a person in a poor bargaining position because the country is being invaded and tried to rob. And Zelensky even said he's trying to make a colony of my country, and that won't do. I applaud you, Volodymyr Zelensky, for your efforts, for your leadership, for your democratic leanings. And I thank you for standing up to this fucking bully and this brute. This person has no business to be the leader of the free world. And he just lost it with this. He's no longer. Volodymyr Zelensky, you are the new leader of the free world, at least a figurehead. When we get great leaders of Britain, Germany, France, and so forth, that'll hopefully take the lead and help you as much as they can. Why was this done? If I'm right to say this was a pre-planned attack, a concerted effort to attack Zelensky, and I gave you my reasons, right? They want him out of office. Putin wants him out of office. Let's be specific. Putin tried the illegitimacy tack, which didn't work, trying to say the Ukrainian constitution does not allow for the president to remain in power right during time of war upon cessation, upon surcease of his term. And of course, this is a special instance here. And, we're talking about a time of war. So there's some urgency here. And the Congress itself has no problems. Approval ratings are fairly high. And, you can't have an election. This would be disastrous for the war effort. If there's not unanimity of opinion by the Ukrainian people in time of war, if there's any sort of political bickering, which you might get with the presidential election, Putin wins. Even if they get ultimately a person in place who is just as dead against Putin's sanguinary tactics, it would still be the case that Putin wins because there will have been a delay, there'll be some infighting, and maybe there'll be a sort of degeneration of the sort of unity Ukrainians had politically expressed prior to the election. So this is simply a pre-planned effort by Trump and his moronic, asshole, sycophantic vice president to remove Volodymyr Zelensky, to discredit him. And you already get some, Republican congresspersons already blaming Zelensky, get him out of office, right? That's exactly what they were trying to do, right? The illegitimacy tack didn't work, so we're going to try to embarrass him in front of an international audience. The only problem is it might work with some of the stupid fucking congressmen, but it's not working with the general public across the globe, except for those people and countries that are lined up with the murderous Putin. Anyways, please, again, share, and I think this is important. Whatever modest contribution I could make to enabling you to think, for God's sake, think on your own. Ditto heads, I shouldn't even appeal to you because there's nothing I can say to make you think for yourself. This guy has become a god. And no matter what I say to you to appeal, if you want to agree with Trump in the end, do so, but think it through. I think most people who voted for Trump are incapable of thinking. Right? They've allowed Trump to think for them. Right? There's complete agreement with issues across the board. So it's sort of a scary situation. I'm less worried about Ukraine pulling through this in a in a manner in which they preserve their democracy, in a manner in which they at some point do enter NATO, because I think that's in the future. I don't know how long in the future. I am worried about what's going on in the United States right now, whether it will survive this. And even if we do get Trump out of office, are we so much of a plutocracy with the two-party system? Do we have the influence of money influence elections to such a great extent, right? What was it that Elon Tusk or Musk, whatever his name is, donated something like $120 million to Trump's campaign? When you've got people donating large sums of money, you've got elections being bought, then there's no question that in 3 times that Trump ran for presidency, that Russia was backing him, right? And with propaganda money and all sorts of things to sway the election. That's not what we need. We need real reforms going on. We need more than two parties, and we need to get Trump the fuck out of office. Again, this is the doctor wishing you a great day. It's the morning where I'm at, and I hope we get through this. It's not going to be swimmingly, but I hope we survive through this and maintain a semblance of our democracy. We'll see you again at some point. Thank you.